So to start us off, just really happy to make an acknowledgement of country and acknowledge the Gunditj Mara, the Djab the Jad Wajali, and the Wandig people as the traditional owners of the land where you were joining from today, and also the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation where I am, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Very grateful for the ongoing care of country that Aboriginal people continue to do, and very blessed to live in this part of the world in central Victoria. So today we have clearly a number of slides for you, but hopefully they're really useful slides, not trying to create a PowerPoint overload, but just really wanting to give you all the background that you need to understand what this program is about. And I will also break it up with some really great videos, short videos from communities that we've partnered with in the past. So we'll cover a little bit about FRRR for those of you who don't know us so well, and talk about the IRCF program and the origin, and really work through a little bit about the background, how the programs come together, the key elements of the program, our learnings. I guess the beauty of bringing this program to Victoria is that we've got 5 years of learning from New South Wales communities. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and next steps, and there'll be hopefully plenty of time for questions if you have any. So a little bit about FRRR for those that don't know us too well. We are the only national foundation specifically focused on ensuring social and economic strength in rural, regional and remote areas. We go back to 2000, established in 2000. It was an initiative of the federal government and the Sydney Myer Fund to create a foundation that was really focused on resourcing rural and regional communities, which was a real gap at that time. And, you know, you could argue that there's never enough support, but FRRR is really focused on addressing some of those priorities. So over that period of time, there's been 177 million invested into 14,000 projects. So it'll be a little bit higher than that. That was our previous annual review figures. But yeah, we've been busy over that time. And in the last financial year alone, there was 22.5 million across, 1,100 projects. So we are really focused on being community-led, and our, I guess, philosophy is that local communities and leaders are the best place to know what they need to achieve positive impact and outcome in their communities. We've got a pretty wonderful board that governs FRRR, which is led by Tim Fairfax. And a great team. So we're very lucky in that respect. The way that we thought it'd be interesting just to talk about and set some context about the way that we work, which is through these 4 streams or themes. So our vision is a vibrant, resilient and revitalised remote, rural and regional Australia. And we talk about our work through 4 themes, being people, the first one, and that's where the Investing in Rural Community Futures program sits. And it's about investing in the power of people to drive prosperity, ensuring equity, inclusion, opportunity, well-being. That's kind of the intention of the people stream. The next one is place, and it's really about working in a place-based way, supporting community resilience and cultural vibrancy, particularly in more remote communities. FRRR is a national foundation, as I said, and it has a footprint across the country, into all states and territories, which we're really proud of, and really do a lot of work in the background to make sure that all communities have the opportunity to benefit from partnering and engaging with FRRR. We are very lucky to have a really broad remit which sets FRRR apart, and a special tax status, which enables us to support funding into non-DGR organisations, which we know, is the majority of those in rural and regional settings. And one of the things that we can also support, which is a little different to some other funders, is around economic sustainability, and that's a real focus for our work. The third one is disaster resilience. We know that climate change and natural disasters are the biggest threat to the sustainability and viability of rural and regional and remote Australia, and that solutions are held in local knowledge that people hold. So partnering with communities before, during and after disasters is very much something that we do, and something that over recent years there's been many challenges that we're all aware of, and it's certainly been a busy space for us to work in, but particularly our focus of work in the disaster context is in medium to long-term support for communities around recovery, but also preparedness, very much in a preparedness context. And the final one being climate solutions. This is the newest stream in terms of our work, but certainly what we hear from communities in an ongoing way is that it's really important and something that they'd like to be able to support through through their ideas and initiatives. So supporting communities to activate and strengthen local climate solution projects and such. So on to IRCF. IRCF is the short version of Investing in Rural Community Futures. FRRR has a real passion for acronyms, so apologies for that. Often sounds like we work for a radio station, but we we do our best to not speak too much lingo. So the backstory of FRRR. Back in 2017, an impact study that we did showed the unmet demand for particularly not-for-profit organisational capacity building. And this has been something that we hear about in an ongoing way. We were very lucky at that time that the Vincent Fairfax Family Foundation, or VFFF, was interested in partnering with us to see if we could find a way to work with communities in a place-based way to really strengthen the people in those communities. So that was really where the idea and the opportunity first came from to work in this way through this program. We also, back in 2021, we did a really wide survey of rural and regional communities called the Heartbeat of Australia study. All this information is on our website if you want to go deeper, but it really reinforced all of those things that we were hearing and seeing, and the ongoing pressure on not-for-profits, the persistent gap in funding for capacity building, and a real desire to change that. So over the last 5 years, we've worked with 8 pilot communities across New South Wales, which has been an incredible experience and opportunity to really test out this model and way of working. And the key things that we wanted to address and to be integral to the program itself was ensuring that there was a collaborative focus, so fostering collaborations between not-for-profit organisations to really create efficiencies within the sector about the way that they operate, and increase capacity or capability for community-wide advocacy on issues that are important to each community. Flexibility was going to be critical, and having the flexibility to work over 5 years is pretty great, and also really important for this process, and that there is grounded in a community roadmap that's co-designed with the community, but can change over time and move with things that might happen. So in those New South Wales communities, some of those communities during that period of time have experienced flood, they've experienced bushfire, they've experienced COVID, sometimes all of those things together. So having the 5-year time frame allows us to sort of navigate and work around as these shocks and other challenges might come to play for particular communities. And the final thing is, we always are evaluating and learning from our work, and that's a really critical part of this program to keep doing that. So for Victoria, this is the really wonderful piece, and it's why we're all here today. We have 4 funders that have come together in a $5 million partnership to contribute to 3 communities over the period. So the Jack Brockhoff Foundation, the William Buckland Foundation, Helen Macpherson Smith Trust, and the Ross Trust. So we, to have the opportunity to work with 4 funders in this way, very supportive funders, all very committed to Victorian communities, is pretty unique, and obviously we're pretty excited about that. So the theory of change for the program, so this is really the nitty-gritty and getting into the weeds, but I think it's important as you learn more about the program and what the opportunity is to understand the context of this and our thinking and reasoning behind the approach. So to build strong, collaborative, resilient and sustainable rural, regional and remote communities by providing flexible support and funding to local not-for-profit organisations that allows them to advocate effectively. So again, you can see those themes of collaboration, advocacy coming together. The why, because we know that not-for-profit organisations need more time and resources and funding to reach their full potential and take on local challenges, gaps and priorities. So by providing funding and other wraparound support dedicated to strengthening those particularly systems, efficiencies, strategies and people, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, it can support high-functioning organisations to be more resilient to some of those shocks and adaptive change that I also mentioned, which leads to a stronger, more resilient, ideally, not-for-profit sector achieving greater impact on their mission, and ultimately a higher functioning, more viable, more sustainable not-for-profit sector doing their incredibly vital work for remote, rural and regional communities. So to break that down a little bit in terms of what the reality of the program is and how we've developed the different elements for the program that hopefully deliver on all of those things that we've talked about. So I think it's important to mention here that there's a number of elements and all of those make the program achieve some really positive outcomes. But going on the entire journey for communities, for local organisations is really important. The dipping in and out of certain elements, we really encourage full participation in all of these elements. So the program is specifically for locally governed not-for-profits and particularly the small to medium locally led grassroots organisations. That is the sweet spot and the target for this program. There is funding available, but I also want to emphasise that the funding is fantastic and can be great to activate ideas and projects, but it's just one piece that works alongside all of these other things. And funding is available for organisational, like individual organisations, as well as collaborative sector-wide activities and projects. And there's about $600,000 per community available in funding throughout the program. The community facilitator is probably the gold of the program. That is a local person engaged by FRRR to be a role of a mentor, a coach, a connector within their community. They become a really valuable source of information and conduit between FRRR and the community, and can provide support around applying for funding through the program, helping develop programs or projects and applications, and being that connector between organisations to really help drive the collaborative community approach to the program that we hope evolves over time. The community roadmap is something that is foundational and revisited throughout the program. So the community road mapping process happens at the beginning of the program. So in this case, it would be for our partner communities early next year, around March, April. It will be an in-community workshop inviting broadly not-for-profit organisations to join for a really participatory, collaborative workshop to look at gaps, priorities, interests, the next 3 to 5 years. Where would you like to see action, activity happening around collaboration, around organisational capabilities, all of those sorts of things. So that there's community roadmaps for all our New South Wales communities on our website. You can find them there. If you wanted to have a look at any of those, you're really welcome. That's something that's revisited on an annual basis. And obviously, community roadmaps, things will be achieved, things will change, but that's the purpose, that they provide a foundation for how the resourcing for the program is spent and invested into your community, but also a guide for the program over the 5 years. We've talked about collaboration, but that is interestingly around, really building trust. Sometimes it's around, we know that funding is often a competitive process, and this community, this program works to potentially unlearn some of that competition and work in a really collective, collaborative way by facilitating and encouraging, structured conversation and shared learnings. There's a digital hub. The FRRR website has developed a specific IRCF Investing in Rural Community Futures program section, which houses all the information and resources for communities, including those community roadmaps, but lots of other useful gems, and that's all available. You can have a look at that anytime. Evaluation, as I said, is a critical part of the program. We had a great evaluation partner through our New South Wales partner communities, and the learning has been immense and fantastic, and we'll be able to leverage that as we introduce the program to Victoria. But to note, as partner communities, there is an expectation of being involved in evaluation activities, which are really designed to add value to the program. They're participatory often, they're collaborative, but they're also intentionally designed to not be a burden. So I guess I can give you some examples of what it might look like. We're still designing that for the Victorian program, but just some ideas. There might be one-on-one interviews. There may be self-assessment surveys that might be every 6 months or 12 months for individual organisations. There's the community workshopping process, and those community facilitators that are engaged in each community provide regular reports back as well. So it's a combined approach of information, but is really important for learning, both for FRRR and for your community, to help guide what happens next. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about people and efficiencies and systems and strategy. So these are what we call our 4 pillars of capacity building. These are the areas where we focus the investment for the program around each of these elements. We talk about these pillars in an ongoing way, so it becomes really common language around engaging, around grants, around the evaluation. So that would all become very familiar. There's lots of text on this slide. Don't necessarily read all of it, but just to note that investing in people is around developing leadership capabilities. It's around fostering skill development. It's around volunteerism, recruitment and training, leadership development, all of those sorts of things. Efficiencies is really about looking for ways to work together effectively to enhance community impact, whether it might be sharing resources, collective impact training, mentoring opportunities. Often a lead agency emerges in a community that can play a really key role. Systems is around ensuring that not-for-profit organisations have the things that they need to operate really well. So that might be investing in things like legal structures and compliance and governance, or financial management, board skills, IT, equipment, that sort of stuff, financial management systems, all of those sorts of elements. And strategy, providing the tools and measures that support and enable the sustainability of organisations to be strong into the future. So it may be, sometimes we've used funds to support a consultant to come in and really work through an organisation's purpose and vision, and strategic planning and monitoring, or reviewing a revenue strategy and reshaping that for the future. So those, as I said, is the four kind of foundational stones of the program in terms of the investment and how the funds are invested along those sorts of lines. I've mentioned our New South Wales partners. It's been a real privilege to work with 8 communities. You can see them on the map there. So Nambucca, Leeton, Junee were the first 3 that joined the program, and then we were supported by VFFF funding, and then we were really fortunate to get additional funding to work with Nowra, Bay and Basin, Ulladulla, Batemans Bay and Bega Valley. So you can see there's some kind of key stats there around the sort of impact that we've achieved. Total funding of 4.15 million. The funded organisations across those communities was 85. 145 individual projects funded. And one of the really wonderful outcomes that we see is that funding from FRRR through this particular program really supports organisations to build their capacity and capability to leverage more funds from other funders. So over $8 million of funds leveraged in addition to that was funded directly by FRRR through the program. Another really, I guess, key learning and interesting figure was that 127 people were employed with those funds across the program in various ways. I think it really speaks to that notion that's been kind of a bit of a buzz theme in philanthropy. You may be familiar around paying what it takes, making sure that organisations have the money to invest in employing people to drive action and create change and build partnerships to get processes and procedures right. And we've seen that this can be a real game changer in our New South Wales communities. So it's been really great to be able to fund people to drive local activity. I guess the other things that I would say about some of the learnings is around the time, and we've talked about the 5 years, but progress happens at the pace of communities, and that each community is unique. And that's, I think, one of the strengths of this program as well, is that it's flexible in that respect, and that communities do need flexibility and time to allow conditions for long-term change to happen and to respond to emerging challenges and issues. So in our mind, 5 years is a really exciting opportunity to work in that way and have the resources to wrap around that. Trust, I guess, is the other big thing. Building trust starts at the outset of the program and happens over time, and we're really aware of that. Local leaders are keen to collaborate and network, but are often time poor, we know that. And the support of a neutral facilitator in the community to build trust and pathways and practices. As I said, that's a piece of gold for the program. And we know that also, we talked about time, but over time we see cross-cultural collaborations emerging as well, which can be a real strength in overall community connectivity and collaboration. And the other thing I think is around tenacity. It's really essential to understand the broader ecosystem and economic context and stakeholders that can support longevity and outcomes of the IRCF program beyond the 5 years. and establishing clear pathways for future funding and resource is a focus for the program, so that we don't get to the end of 5 years and then, you know, what happens now. There's and again, different for each community, but a very thoughtful approach in terms of how we work ourselves out of a partnership, and hopefully is not needed in the same way. And there's new opportunities, partnerships, connections that can carry on beyond the IRCF program. And part of that is around, you know, supporting really strong relationships between local councils, other regional organisations, that can provide, you know, important future options and sector support. So I'm going to share with you, to break up my voice, a really lovely video from some of our partners in New South Wales.
The highlight of the IRCF funding was to get us literally into this century. Prior to that funding, we couldn't afford all the IT that we now have. Everything was done on my computer and the treasurer's computer. We now have that. We have point of sale for our sales. We know exactly what's sold. At the end of each week, we know where we're up to financially there. But on top of that, we've also met with other not-for-profits in town, and we're sharing things, and we're learning more about each other. It really has brought the community together.
I think IRCF should be delivered in many communities, because I think so many rural community organisations struggle with governance. They struggle with even legalities of what committee roles hold. I also think it's an important feature to be able to bring communities together and achieve similar goals without wearing out multitudes of volunteers. So shared resources is a huge thing.
The grant funded a coordinator for the Leeton Business Chamber. It's really allowed us to mature as an organisation. I think it really helped with collaborating, like embedding ourselves into the community, being identifiable, who we are, what we do. And I think it really helped us. We found a place in collaborating with industry and not-for-profits, bringing them together and forming relationships through events and other opportunities that we were able to create because we had more people on board.
So much nicer to hear it in their words than mine. So I hope that gave you some useful insights from them. Something else just to let you know that is in the ether is I've mentioned the VFFF support for the program. We've recently released an impact report for all to kind of dive into and learn more about that. It's got some wonderful case studies. It lists all the funded projects and talks about some of the outcomes of those. Lots of learnings and capacity building outcomes for communities. So you are welcome to access the report through the specific IRCF Victoria webpage, which is there for you, if you'd like to learn more. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about one of our communities, which is Junee in New South Wales. They, it's just a great story. They're all great stories, but if I have to choose one, I decided I would run with Junee. So 11 organisations were heavily involved in the program. There was $800,000 of funding over the 5 years across 26 projects. So at the outset of the IRCF program in Junee, during their community roadmap workshop, one of the things that came strongly in their road mapping session was the need for a community hub and the lack of a community hub in town. And there was an organisation called the Junee Community Centre, which was emerging or had aspiration to see if they could be useful in that role, which was really supporting the broader community as well. So in 2019, they received funding to develop and work on the strategy for Junee Community Centre and look at what the possibilities were and whether it could play a role as a community hub in that area. In 2021, it became clear that they were time poor in terms of their manager. So they received a subsidy for a centre manager to free up their time to work on compliance and reputation and sustainability for the organisation. So that was a game changer for them, to allow that person to step away, somebody else to take on that day-to-day role, and to think a little bit more bigger picture. They then received funding for a financial sustainability plan to scope land acquisition towards the community hub, and also support for a feasibility study of the physical hub. So excited to say that that feasibility study has now occurred. They received funding for that last year, which has demonstrated that a community hub is a feasible option for them. And so they're progressing what that will look like to really drive that outcome for their community and look for other opportunities for funding to make that happen. They've had a community development officer in a position there as well to build on work through the IRCF program in an ongoing way. The other thing that they received support to get involved with was some professional development. So that's another thing that we can support through the IRCF program, is for local organisations to attend forums or conferences that are outside of their region to build their own capacity and bring that back to their community. So in that instance, it was the Social Impact in the Regions Conference, which was a fantastic professional development opportunity for their staff at the centre. Some other outcomes for Junee more broadly. So that was talking about Junee Community Centre, who really were emerging as a backbone organisation for that community. But other outcomes more community-wide is that they've recognised, and you heard from some of the video there, that they're a more confident and connected community, and they have the confidence to advocate for things that are important to them. One of them, you can see the Commonwealth Bank sign up there on the slide. That was due to close in their community, and that community came together and advocated for that to stay in town, and that's something that they achieved, and they still got their bank, which was a great outcome for them. They attracted, by having the opportunity to review their financial modelling and systems, they've attracted NDIS funding and other grants and so on to the community to really change up the services that they can offer across the community. They did a lot of work around volunteer engagement and sustainability, connection, and new next generation workforce as well. So some really exciting outcomes over that community, and happened over time, small steps, but created some really impactful outcomes for them. Thought I'd just also mention Junee Community Power, one of their local organisations there, just to sort of highlight, going back to the 4 pillars that I talked around: systems and strategy and people and efficiencies. So in terms of, funding is, often a really exciting piece about these sorts of program opportunities. But as I mentioned, it's just one piece in the whole kind of suite of things. But for Junee Community Power, the sorts of funding support that they received, so back in 2020, they had funding over the time to help them refine their processes and clarify their vision and their business model. And it built their capacity to really support their community through the renewable energy transition. And they're in a really great place now to be able to do that in an ongoing way. So early on, they received a grant for their own organisation, $15,000 to invest in solar systems to develop a community-owned renewable energy circular fund. Then the following year, they received another grant of $47,000 to generate working examples to support Junee's not-for-profits to solve energy wastage. And then, so those 2 sort of blue grants were specific organisational funding to Junee Community Power. And then the green one is color coded differently. It's called a little box there called a toolbox grant. That's what I was talking about, where we can support collaborative activity through our grants. So not just organisational focused, but more community focused. And so they received a grant to do a feasibility study into a community battery installation mid last year. So those grants would fall into the systems and strategy element of those pillars, to give you a little bit of an idea of, you know, what's happened in other communities. So I guess to kind of try and bring it all together a little bit, we've had the opportunity to kind of explore and research community profiles, and we know sort of the size of communities that this program works really well for. And we've been speaking to some key contacts in your community, but we've only really scratched the surface. And obviously you are the experts of Hamilton and the surrounding area. So keen to learn from you more through the next steps, which we'll talk about. But I guess where are we going next? So we're looking to partner with communities that are ready and really eager and willing to participate fully in this model and this program that we're able to offer. So whilst, you know, we're keen to partner with communities, equally we want communities that are really willing and excited to partner with FRRR in this way. We're looking for communities that want to make an impact together, so have shared interests and priorities. We've looked into communities in terms of profiling around the diversity of not-for-profit sector and local leaders. And so that's really important. You know, we want a broad representation of community involved in this program to make it really bring the greatest value to the communities that we partner with. We talked a little about shared priorities and opportunities. Community and industry profile. So we understand a little bit about what's happening in your community, and there's different themes and challenges and interest in each. So what's happening with industry? What are the really driving interests around for your community organisations and local people? So we want to learn about those things, understand it better, and obviously that will happen over time. But I think those are all interesting in terms of helping us to identify the communities that are right to partner with us at this particular time. And we're really keen to see active small to medium-sized not-for-profits doing really wonderful, vital work in your communities. And that's, as I said, that's the sweet spot for that size of organisation to really benefit from the resourcing and the style of approach that we have to offer through the program. A last little video I'll share with you.
Junie's very, very good at standing up for one another, particularly when things get tough. So the purpose of the Junie Community Centre is to try and get the best possible outcome for our members of community, our aged, people living with disability and other vulnerable members.
From a council perspective especially, it's been great to establish the good connection with FRRR. Previously, I think everyone was sort of siloed and wanted to benefit individually. Now I think everyone's happy when we collaborate together, and as a team we can achieve the goals that we all want to achieve.
To have someone come in and see you from a completely different aspect and say, I've got faith in you. I believe when someone's got faith in you, you'll do anything.
I think the message for communities considering the IRCF program is do it. At the end of the day, you are investing in community for vibrancy and longevity, and it is absolutely worth it.
Okay, so next steps. Hopefully many of you have received the direct email that we circulated recently a couple of weeks ago with information about the program and also information about the expression of interest. So next steps from our end is to invite you to connect with your community to have a think about that expression of interest. It is 4 questions. We've invited one organisation to take a lead in that, but to really to submit that expression of interest, but to really engage the community, your community, in pulling that together and sharing with us a little bit more information about Hamilton. It's intentionally supposed to be light in terms of not creating a particular burden to complete, and hopefully that's the case. We're really mindful of this time of year. It's getting into that really hectic, Christmas is certainly firmly in our sights. So we are asking for that to be submitted by the 11th of December. It is awkward timing for us. We would have probably preferred to not be trying to straddle the kind of Christmas festive season break, but we also are equally keen to hit the ground running in the new year, to invite communities on the back of the expression of interest to community workshops in the 2 weeks, 3rd to 14th of February. And we know that many people take, and particularly not-for-profit and community organisations, take a well-needed break over December, January. So we don't want it to be a surprise when February comes along, and we're really keen to come to you, come to the communities and bring a half-day workshop to those communities. So that will be designed to be a real value add. So we can move forward with 3 communities, and we're likely to invite more than 3 communities to those February workshops. But we see them as a capacity building opportunity at the very least. And we'll be looking for ways for those communities that we potentially can't continue on, or we feel like it's not the right time, or so on, that there might be other opportunities out of that workshop for the communities themselves. So that's the process. Keen to understand if there's any real hiccups for your community within that time that we could potentially work around to make sure that is suitable between the 13th and 14th of Feb. So it would just be a half-day workshop. And I think I'm going to pass it over to you guys now to ask any questions that you might have. So thank you for listening. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see some more faces, because I really can't see very many, and that will make it much more interactive for me.
I have a question, Jo.
Yeah, of course. Hi, Dee.
Hi. Thanks for that presentation. It's really good to hear more about the program and what could potentially happen moving forward. When it comes to putting in the expression of interest, how do we know who the lead agency should be? Like, could Standing Tall be the lead organisation submitting the form, but finding like-minded not-for-profits, or does council have to be the lead agency?
No, in fact, we'd probably prefer that it's a local not-for-profit in your organisation that is the lead agency. So absolutely, Standing Tall could be that organisation. Again, we're not wanting to kind of give too many requirements on how you have to do it. We'd like, that to suit you. And but yes, we could very well be Standing Tall, an organisation that has the capacity to, I guess, connect with some people. And what we'd love to see is that there's sort of a diverse representation in whoever's kind of contributed to that expression of interest. And I didn't mention before, but only one expression of interest is required per community. But if it makes sense for whatever reason, whatever is happening in your community or capacity-wise for a certain organisation, there's 2 expressions of interest led by different organisations would also be totally fine. So pretty open, and happy to take calls after this to talk about what you're thinking, if that's helpful.
Do we know who's represented by these organisations today?
In terms of who's on the line?
Yes.
Yeah, good question. So I had wondered, and whether it would be helpful to share some of the contacts, but we'd need your permission to do that. So we can circulate an email afterwards, and if anybody would like to opt out of that, perhaps that's the best way, and then we can share those contacts if that's helpful.
It would be useful.
Yeah, great. I can see a hand raised, so feel free to pop things in the chat as well. Emily's monitoring that, but Mary Ann, I can see your hand.
Yeah, look, I don't know what's happened to the camera, but the image has disappeared. Look, I'm based at Dunkeld, and I chair the Dunkeld Community Centre. And I see there's a question in the chat from Annette, who's our part-time manager. So Hamilton's about 10,000, and then there's 9 small communities. Colerane's about 1,000, Dunkeld's about 600-700. So I take it, Joe, from what you're saying that so there could be an expression of interest, say, from Hamilton, but also for a couple of the smaller communities as well. Is that what you're saying for the Hamilton area as a whole? Is that what you sort of?
Yeah. So good question. I don't expect individual townships that are surrounding to submit their own application, and would encourage you and from a efficiencies and time perspective to connect into maybe 1 or 2 expressions of interest if that was useful. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're asking communities to self-identify, I suppose. So if those 9 townships that you mentioned are connected to Hamilton and feel connected in terms of access to services and other things, if we say Hamilton broadly, and it's really tricky for us to we're not trying to opt in or opt out anybody. We're trying to make welcome anybody that feels, or any organisations that feel connected to Hamilton. So yeah.
Can I just say,
does that help?
It's not really, to be honest, because Hamilton is the service town and has traditionally been the service town. So there's a whole range of services, health, education, retail, all sorts of things. And the small towns are basically distributed in a circle around the town in the local government area. I'm not sure that there's a standout organisation in terms of Hamilton. Many of the smaller towns have progress associations or similar bodies that would be seen as perhaps representing their view. It's not quite so clear-cut in Hamilton. There is a business association, and then you've got providers like whether it's the health service, and you've got some of those organisations online like Rotary, Standing Tall Today. And putting on my Dunkeld hat, I would rather put in an expression of interest for Dunkeld as opposed to under the umbrella of Hamilton, because there's quite different issues in the smaller communities, I think. There's certainly some similarities, but there's certainly differences of scale and that sort of. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the things, so you said I think Dunkeld's about 1,000. One of the things about our selection process will be making sure that communities can fully absorb the program across their not-for-profit sector. So, we're looking broadly at Hamilton and whatever townships would like to participate. Like I've talked through the sorts of activities and things and elements that will be involved around a road mapping process for the Hamilton community. So understanding that surrounding townships like Dunkeld might have different things going on. But that community road mapping process, there will be one inviting the Hamilton community and surrounding townships that would like to participate in that. So just being realistic about, that we won't have the sort of resourcing capacity to run individual sort of community road mapping things, if that's kind of what maybe where you're thinking. I'm not 100%. But yeah, that's sort of the context.
What I'm saying is I think Hamilton's actually got less capacity in terms of those central organisations than some of the smaller towns. We've got a community bank, a tourism association, a community centre. There's probably about 50 different organisations here. The CFA, SES, I could go on. I'm just not sure. And look, some of the people, the Hamilton people, it may be a case of, is it Standing Tall or the Rotary Club that takes leadership here? Because I don't think there's no Ratepayers Association, for example, in Hamilton, hasn't been for a very long time. So where's the body that would that straddles the Hamilton community as a whole? Whereas I think it's more clear cut in the smaller communities, and the capacity to deliver some of the things you're talking about in those smaller communities there's probably could be greater chance of success. I've probably said enough.
Can I add?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I just, sorry, Dee, just before you jump in there, I would just say that the lead organisation for this particular expression of interest process is not taking on anything in a long-term way. They're just supporting this one-off invitation to submit an expression of interest, and it's not that they're, in an ongoing way signing up to anything in particular, to lead anything in particular. It's just someone to coordinate a response from the community. Yeah. Did you want to add anything there, Dee?
Well, all I would add, that was what I was thinking as well, Jo. That's how I understood the program, that we're putting in an EOI for our community, but not necessarily to manage all the funds or to manage everything. No. So you'll have a coordinator in region for that. But I guess for me, the way I see it, and this could be wrong, and I'd still want to talk to our committee of management to ensure that we're on the right track. But I see it as an opportunity for an organisation like Standing Tall to potentially put in an EOI, but connecting with other agencies within our township or region that are also working on a similar priority moving forward. So for us, it's youth. The future of young people in our region. That is exactly what we do in our strategic plan. We said we wanted to collaborate with our local other not-for-profits and agencies who are also focused on youth as a priority. So that's how I see it, as an opportunity for potentially my role to connect with these organisations that I already work with and get them in on this expression of interest, put that in so that at least we have that opportunity for this region to connect with FRRR and maybe have, maybe be successful moving forward. I'm not sure. I don't see it as from maybe the perspective Marianne was talking about, that it's the town itself and every not-for-profit getting involved within the town. I don't necessarily see it that way, but I could be wrong. I mean, I would still work with the outside towns because we do have schools in towns that aren't in Hamilton, that have young people in towns outside of Hamilton. So I don't necessarily see it as a town versus Hamilton thing, but
Thanks, Dee. I guess what I would say to that is, I'm aware of the youth focus in Hamilton, and it's been great to have some conversations about that. But I just would also like to consolidate that IRCF is one of the great things about it is it's broad in its remit around themes. It's not specific about theme. It can organisations with a focus on and mission around environment or youth or health and wellbeing. Often we see great engagement from the Chamber of Commerce in local communities, and they can play a really great role in skill development and connections within the community. So the program is intentionally broad to allow broad participation from not-for-profits with a range of different purposes, not just one particular one. So hopefully that's helpful. I'm mindful that we've got a couple more minutes. Emily and I are okay to stay on the line if there are more questions. Very happy to do so. But if there's people that need to jump off, really that's fine too. But really appreciate your time in joining us and interest in the program. Do we have any questions in the chat, Emily?
Just more
Joe,
about how.
Sorry, Joe, I had a question. It was just around, does everyone who's attending this group have the access to the 4 questions? I'm not sure that everyone has seen those.
Yeah, so we will certainly distribute them. We'll send a follow-up email after today's session, and we can include, that again so that everybody's got that to hand. Thanks for that. It's a good reminder. Can see how to not-for-profit. I hopefully we addressed your question, Annette, in that previous conversations, how do not-for-profits outside Hamilton participate. So yeah, if you've got any further questions, yell out, but I feel like we've kind of discussed that a bit. And Leonie, I think a lot of people in this group already know each other. We would welcome discussing with any of you how we can collaborate. Great. Thanks, Leonie. Western District Health Service. So we will, follow up with our email as well. If anyone would like to opt out of sharing contact emails and names and organisations, then please let us know. We'll give you some time to respond to that before perhaps sharing it by in the next couple of days. Any more questions?
Hi, it's Jane from Council here. Probably similar thinking to Marianne with our out of towns do have progress associations that represent the whole community, and we probably don't have that in Hamilton, and that's probably one of Council's roles. WDHS probably do that. So, but you're saying you would prefer a larger organisation not to be the lead agency?
We would definitely love to see the support of Council, but yeah, I think our preference would be that a local not-for-profit leads the expression of interest.
Yeah.
If that becomes, and we don't need to solve this now, I'm happy to take calls about this, but if there's, concern or issues about doing that, we can revisit that. Marianne, can see your hand up again.
Yeah, look, this is probably more to everybody who's on the screen. I mean, if we're going to progress this, we probably need to have a meeting or do something so we work out a strategy. If there is interest in putting in that expression of interest, we've only got really 2 weeks to do that. So I don't know whether that's something that we can organise now, given that it's a pretty tight time frame. Oh, Susan Brumby says she's happy to organise. Good on you, Sue.
If it's Jane again from Council, look, I'm happy to also help organise that. If we've got facilities and offices here, if we could get people's contacts.
Yeah. What I can do is I'll send an email after this meeting. If everyone can just reply saying happy for everyone to share their details, then I can send everyone the details back, and then you guys can kind of work out what's best to meet and have those conversations to get your expression of interest, if that works for everyone.
I've just put in the chat, I'm happy for my contact details to be shared.
Right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll keep a record of those. And maybe we'll just put a cut-off time by, I don't know, lunchtime tomorrow or something to opt out. And if not, we'll share the details. I'd just like to, respond about, the conversation around the central organisation. Sometimes you're not alone in terms of other communities that we've worked with. And sometimes, the IRCF program is an opportunity for a lead organisation to emerge over time, or a backbone organisation that we might, the way we might talk about it. So, again, this is in the first instance just about demonstrating a collective interest in this program, and what you've heard about today over the next 5 years. Have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to connecting down the track.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for the topic.
Thank you.
Pleasure.